Welcome to the Horror Story channel, where nightmares come to life. Join us for spine-chilling tales of terror, creepy urban legends, and haunted places. If you're brave enough to face your deepest fears, hit the subscribe button for our latest horror stories. Without any delay, let's jump right into the story. The old house on Willow Street. Anna had heard whispers about the old house on Willow Street even before she arrived in the small, rural town of Willow Creek. The locals spoke of it in hushed tones, warning visitors to stay away from the dilapidated building with its boarded-up windows and overgrown lawn. But Anna was not like most visitors. She was drawn to the mystery of the old house and couldn't resist the urge to explore its dark secrets. As she approached the house, Anna could feel her heart pounding in her chest. The air was thick with a musty odor, and the silence was deafening. She hesitated for a moment, wondering if she should turn back, but the lure of the unknown was too strong. She took a deep breath and stepped forward, the creaking of the old wooden porch beneath her feet echoing in the empty street. Anna pushed open the rusty front door, and a cloud of dust and cobwebs filled her lungs. She was standing in what used to be the grand entrance hall, but now it was nothing more than a shell of its former self. The walls were covered in peeling wallpaper, and the grand staircase that once led to the upper floors was crumbling. As Anna made her way through the dark and decaying house, she couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. The air was thick with an otherworldly energy, and every creak and groan of the old house sent shivers down her spine. She knew she was not alone in the house, but she couldn't tell whether it was the creaking of the old floorboards or something more sinister. As she explored the house further, Anna came across a room that had been completely untouched by time. The furniture was still in place, covered in a thick layer of dust. The room was so perfectly preserved that Anna could almost picture the former occupants sitting in their chairs, sipping tea and reading books. Suddenly, Anna heard a sound. It was a soft whisper, so quiet that she almost missed it. She strained her ears, trying to hear what it was saying, but it was too faint. Anna felt a chill run down her spine. She knew she had to leave, but the allure of the mystery was too strong. She pressed on, determined to uncover the secrets of the old house on Willow Street. Anna wandered through the quiet streets of Willow Creek, her eyes fixed on the old abandoned house on Willow Street. She was drawn to the house like a moth to a flame, captivated by its eerie charm and the mystery that surrounded it. As she passed by the town square, she noticed a group of people gathered around a small stand, chatting excitedly amongst themselves. Curiosity getting the better of her, she approached the group and asked what they were discussing. One of the town's older residents, a woman with weathered skin and kind eyes, spoke up. "That old house on Willow Street," she said. "You best stay away from it. It's cursed, that house is. Nothing good comes from meddling with things you don't understand." And I couldn't help but feel a shiver run down her spine. She had heard of cursed objects and haunted houses before, but she had always dismissed them as nothing more than superstition. Still, the warning from the townspeople made her feel uneasy, and she wondered what dark secrets the old house on Willow Street was hiding. As the sun began to set, Anna found herself standing in front of the old house. The only sound in the air was the rustling of leaves in the wind. She stared up at the broken windows and the peeling paint, feeling a sense of foreboding wash over her. Suddenly, a noise from the neighboring house caught her attention. She turned her gaze to the house next door, where an elderly man was watching her from behind his curtains. His eyes were dark and piercing, and for a moment, Anna thought she saw a hint of malice in his stare. Feeling unnerved, Anna quickly turned and headed back to her hotel. As she walked, she couldn't help but wonder about the curse and the old man next door. What was their connection to the old house on Willow Street, and what was the secret they were hiding? The night was filled with restless dreams as Anna tossed and turned in her bed, haunted by visions of the old house on Willow Street and the ghostly apparitions that seemed to lurk within its walls. She awoke the next morning with a sense of dread, realizing that she had unwittingly walked into a trap, one that might prove to be deadly if she wasn't careful. And as curiosity about the old abandoned house on Willow Street continued to grow with each passing day, she was unable to resist the urge to explore the dark secrets hidden within its walls. She felt drawn to the house as if an invisible force was pulling her towards it. And his initial fascination soon turned into fear as she began to experience strange occurrences within the house. Doors would creak and slam shut on their own, and she could hear faint whispers and footsteps coming from empty rooms. Anna tried to convince herself that it was just her imagination, but deep down, she knew that there was something else at play. One night, as Anna was wandering through the dark and eerie halls of the house, she heard a loud crash coming from the basement. Her heart racing, she cautiously descended the stairs, her flashlight flickering in the darkness. As she reached the bottom of the stairs, she was startled to see a faint light flickering in the distance. Anna slowly made her way towards the source of the light, her heart pounding in her chest. As she approached, she saw a figure standing in front of a large, dusty mirror. The figure was staring intently at its reflection, its eyes filled with a dark and brooding intensity. Anna tried to back away quietly, but the figure suddenly turned and looked directly at her. Anna froze in fear, unable to move or even breathe. The figure began to move towards her, its footsteps echoing loudly in the silent basement. Anna's mind raced as she tried to think of a way to escape, but it was too late. The figure was upon her, its cold, clammy hand reaching out to touch her. Anna closed her eyes, bracing herself for the worst. But as she opened them again, the figure had vanished into thin air. Anna was left alone in the dark and eerie basement, her heart pounding and her nerves frayed. She realized then that the old house on Willow Street was haunted by something far more sinister than she had ever imagined. Anna's heart raced as she approached Mr. Smith's house, her mind racing with the possibilities of what he might know about the cursed old house on Willow Street. She hesitated for a moment before knocking on the door, wondering if she should turn back now before it was too late. The door creaked open, revealing the silhouette of an old man standing in the dimly lit entryway. His eyes burned to hers as he glared at her with suspicion. "What do you want?" he asked gruffly, his voice deep and raspy. "I'm Anna," she replied, trying to sound confident despite her nerves. "I'm new in town, and I was hoping you could tell me more about the old house on Willow Street." Mr. Smith's expression darkened. "That's a dangerous place," he said sternly. "You shouldn't be poking around there." Anna ignored his warning, feeling a surge of determination in her chest. "I need to know what happened there," she said firmly. "I won't rest until I uncover the truth." Mr. Smith regarded her with a suspicious eye, but eventually relented. "Fine," he said begrudgingly. "Come in, but don't touch anything." Anna followed Mr. Smith into his living room, which was cluttered with dusty old books and antique furniture. She sat down nervously on the edge of a frayed armchair, feeling out of place in the old man's home. Mr. Smith sat down opposite her, his eyes piercing into hers. "I'll tell you what I know," he said, his voice low and serious. "But you have to promise me you won't go back to that house." Anna nodded eagerly, desperate to hear the truth about the cursed old house on Willow Street. "Years ago," Mr. Smith began, "the house was owned by a man named Johnson. He was a cruel and vindictive man who cursed the house before he died. He was rumored to have killed his wife and buried her somewhere on the property." Anna shivered at the thought, feeling a chill run down her spine. "What happened to him?" she asked. "He died in the house," Mr. Smith replied, "but his spirit never left. It haunts the house to this day, seeking revenge on anyone who enters." Anna felt a knot form in her stomach as she listened to Mr. Smith's words. She realized too late that she had gotten in over her head, and that the cursed old house on Willow Street was far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Anna's heart pounded in her chest as she stood face to face with Mr. Smith, the mysterious recluse who lived next door to the old cursed house on Willow Street. She had to know the truth about the curse, and she wasn't leaving until she got it. "Tell me everything," Anna demanded, her voice shaking with fear and anticipation. Mr. Smith's face was lined with deep wrinkles, and his eyes glinted with a mixture of fear and guilt. He hesitated for a moment before finally speaking. "I was Mr. Johnson's accomplice," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "He came to me with a plan to curse the house, to ensure that nobody else would ever live there again." Anna felt a chill run down her spine as she listened to Mr. Smith's confession. She had suspected that the curse was the work of more than one person, but hearing it confirmed was a shock. "Why did he do it?" Anna asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mr. Johnson was a cruel and vindictive man," Mr. Smith said. "He was furious when his wife left him and took their child with her. He swore that nobody would ever live in the house again, and that it would be cursed for all eternity." Anna could feel her heart racing as Mr. Smith continued his confession. She knew that the vengeful spirit haunting the house was that of Mr. Johnson's wife, but she couldn't imagine what horrors she had endured before her death. "What can I do to break the curse?" Anna asked, her voice shaking with fear. Mr. Smith looked at her with a mixture of fear and pity. "There is only one way to break the curse," he said. "You must confront the vengeful spirit and free her from her earthly bonds. But be warned, it will not be easy. The spirit is filled with rage and will stop at nothing to protect the curse." Anna nodded, determined to do whatever it took to break the curse and free the vengeful spirit. She thanked Mr. Smith for his help and left his house, steeling herself for the confrontation to come. As she walked back to the old house on Willow Street, Anna could feel the weight of the curse bearing down on her. She knew that the vengeful spirit was waiting for her, and that her fate was inextricably tied to the cursed house. With a deep breath, she pushed open the front door and stepped inside, ready to face whatever horrors awaited her. The musty smell of the old house filled Anna's nostrils as she made her way through the dark and dusty hallway. Every creak of the floorboards and every whisper of the wind made her heart race with fear. She entered the living room, and her eyes fell on the portrait of Mr. Johnson's wife that hung above the fireplace. The painting was old and faded, but the eyes of the woman in it seemed to follow Anna's every move. Suddenly, the room grew cold, and a chill ran down Anna's spine. She could feel the presence of the vengeful spirit growing stronger, and she knew that it was time to confront it. "Show yourself," Anna called out, her voice echoing through the empty room. Suddenly, the air grew thick with a dark mist, and a figure appeared before Anna. It was the ghost of Mr. Johnson's wife, her eyes blazing with anger and hatred. "You cannot break the curse," the ghost hissed. "Leave this place now, or suffer the consequences." Anna stood her ground, her heart pounding in her chest. "I will not leave until I have freed you from this curse," she said, her voice filled with determination. The ghost lunged at Anna, its spectral hands reaching for her throat. Anna dodged out of the way, her heart racing with fear. She knew that she was no match for the vengeful spirit, but she refused to give up. With every passing moment, the ghost grew stronger, and Anna grew weaker. She could feel the life being drained out of her as she fought to break the curse. Anna had never been more afraid in her life. The vengeful spirit had taken hold of her, and she could feel its icy grip tightening around her heart. But Anna was determined to break the curse, to free Mr. Johnson's family from the spirit's wrath. She dug deep within herself, drawing on every ounce of strength she had, and focused all her energy on breaking the curse. With each passing moment, she felt the spirit's hold on her weakening, and she knew that she was getting closer to breaking the curse. And then, in a sudden burst of light, the curse was broken, and the spirit vanished into thin air. Anna collapsed onto the ground, exhausted and drained, but triumphant. She had done it. She had broken the curse and saved Mr. Johnson's family from a lifetime of misery and fear. Anna's vision began to blur, and she could feel herself slipping away into the darkness. She knew that she had to stay strong, that she had to keep fighting, but her body was giving up. Suddenly, she felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Mr. Johnson, his face etched with worry. "Anna, are you okay?" he asked. Anna tried to speak, but her voice was barely a whisper. She could feel herself losing consciousness. And then, everything went black. Anna woke up in a hospital room, surrounded by her friends and family. They had found her unconscious in the old house on Willow Street, and they had rushed her to the hospital. As Anna lay in her hospital bed, she knew that she had done something incredible. She had broken the curse that had haunted Mr. Johnson's family for generations, and she had saved them from the vengeful spirit. And yet, even as she basked in the glow of her accomplishment, Anna knew that she would never be the same again. She had stared death in the face and had come out victorious, but the memory of that night would haunt her for the rest of her life. As she looked out the hospital window, watching the sunset over the city, Anna knew that she had been changed forever. She had faced her fears and had triumphed over them, but at what cost? She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer of thanks, grateful for the strength and courage that had gotten her through the night. And as she drifted off to sleep, she knew that she would never forget the horrors she had endured in that cursed old house on Willow Street. Thanks for listening to our horror story. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more terrifying tales.